HDR excites me for Switch 2 because it's one of the only, if not only thing I can think of where the display in all users' hands will match that of the content that it has been mastered for. You see, the HDR world feels way more lawless in comparison to SDR, as displays are all over the show as to what they can display and how they, or the user, wants to display it. To try and simplify as much as possible, HDR has a much larger amount of possible colors and also the ability to dictate the brightness. The HDR spec is much beyond what displays today are capable of, hence the lawlessness. Some displays will crush the entire image to show the highlights, some will just clip the highlights, and some will apply a curve. In this SDR video, I try to demonstrate the significance of HDR by changing the exposure of my camera pointing at my TV. My camera is capturing in a much more limited container, making the highlights and shadows impossible to see at the same time, unlike what my actual eyes see looking at the TV. As I lower the exposure of my camera, you'll be able to see the additional highlights that I can see on the TV, at the cost of the shadows. From a sky that was basically white to an extremely well-defined sun. Now imagine that you can clearly see all of the information at once, with a literally bright, well-defined sky, yet still great details in the shadows. That is what a good HDR image will give you, not just increased contrast or a washed out image as some people describe it. Here is a direct feed HDR recording converted to SDR. I can do a similar thing by crushing the sky in post to show more of that detail in an SDR container. Fun part is, when I take a screenshot, the preview blows out the highlights as well. This is because that preview is displaying an image that can't handle the full HDR scope as well. Why Sony does it this way, I'm not quite sure, but you'll notice that if you use the phone app and download the image, it's crushed as well. So, why Switch 2's HDR excites me is that the display in the customer's hands should all have the same technical capabilities, unlike phones, TVs, computer monitors, and so on. This means it should be possible to see exactly what the developers wanted you to see. The color graders can meticulously set the highlights and shadows to what the Switch 2 screen is capable of. It may not be the best HDR screen out there, but at least it will be configured and mastered for the display in the customer's hands properly. Thus, this could very well be the first time that many people will actually see the result of a proper HDR workflow from the studio to the home. And possibly a new wave of a bunch of people wondering why their image looks crazy when trying to share. Of course, docked is a different situation. Getting HDR to display well on your TV is a whole other talking point, which could be another video. Decisions must be made there. For example, some people love or need an overall brighter image and have their TVs in a well-lit room. Others prefer a more cinema-like experience. Lights out, a near pitch black room, and have HDR mostly be overall darker, but with the highlight details, such as lights, or in this case the sun, visually way brighter than the rest of the image. This, arguably, is where HDR and OLED really shines. Basically, in this situation, you're taking advantage of your eyes adjusting in a dark room, making the highlights seem even brighter. If the whole room and TV image was bright, the TV will have less difference between shadows and highlights, and your retina closes, essentially making the image look flatter. Of course, OLEDs are not that bright, so compared to other TVs, look absolutely crap in a bright environment. So in my opinion, what you should actually be doing is getting yourself some really thick curtains and then darkening your room and then putting your TV in a nice dark environment. Grab yourself an OLED.